predicted here to be about 12%. And as you can see on that slide, our best, or some of our native rangeland is at 7%, and our cropping is around 5% now, and we're increasing that every year. And industrialized agriculture has caused the loss of this resource. And that's a picture of me pouting. Yes, I was north of Goodrich, North Dakota, helping a friend soil test this fall, and that was broken CRP. Made me sick. 20 years of soil building gone to the wayside. You could look out there, it looked like a bear was crying out for help, but it was a sad sight. So this has caused skyrocketing input use for us. All these people are spending money on these inputs, which if we focus on biology, we don't need them, and I'll show you that. So it's also destroyed our water cycle. If you look at the drought in the south, I tend to believe that a lot of that is human-made. And it's causing extreme weather patterns as well. So if you look at creating deserts, if this path is continued, what will the earth look like in 100 years? We got to make the decision quick here. Is it going to look like this? If we continue down this path, I wouldn't doubt it. Or will it look like that? So imagine if this was your land here, and you're looking at that desert coming in ever so close each day. You know, if we get to that point, it's already too late. So let's not get there. Okay, so creating deserts. If we look at our food desert now, 60% to 70% of the food in a grocery store consists of either soybeans and corn. So we've taken the diversity out of our food sources, which is not good. And also people are leaving the rural areas and moving to town, mainly due to career loss or opportunities, which I'll present later that this doesn't have to be the case. And also biology is being inhibited by today's current production model. So we need to change this. And how do we regenerate this resource? Focus on building soils and organic matter through soil biology. We got to start with no-till. Obviously, tillage hasn't worked. I'm sure many of you have watched Keith Burns' The Dust Bowl. Pretty good series that was on PBS there a couple months ago. But we should learn from that mistake and learn that we need to move forward and not have the same thing happen again, because we're really going down that path once again. So we need to focus on diversity and be biologically driven. Notice logically, it makes sense. To me, it's common sense. So if we look at land management and consequences, I made this inverted triangle here, just showing the different levels. We start at the bottom at tillage. We all know we can't continue civilization by utilizing tillage. Then we move to no-till, which 20 years ago was a good step, but now we need to move above that. I kind of rival no-till to wiping your ass with hotel toilet paper. You can keep doing it, but do you really get anywhere? And then at the top, holistic land regeneration by focusing on biology. And these are the consequences of these land management practices. We can either degrade or regenerate, sequester carbon, release carbon into the atmosphere, and we can be biologically driven or input driven. I choose biology because it's cheap and it works for us. So I figured a definition was needed. The term soil health, like many others, like sustainability, is getting infiltrated. So it's a continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that not only sustains, but nurtures us as well. And I had to point this out because this is an NDSU soil health team promoting tile drainage. I'm not sure how tile drainage fits into soil health. I hope that they learn from their mistake of doing that and move on from that. So moving on to biological primers, we used to call them cover crops, but they encompass a lot broader topic than just covering the soil. They're feeding our soil life, which ultimately feeds us. And they feed everything starting in the soil, those soil microbes, insects, all the way up to plants, animals, and us. So taking a look at the bacteria, fungi, earthworms, nematodes in the soil, starting there, we must focus on feeding these guys first, because in return they'll feed us. and then insects as well. Once you create those biologically healthy ecosystems, the insects will come, and they're providing a great service for us as well. Moving on to wildlife. And then we like to feed livestock. I found this picture to be kind of ironic. Took this when we were in San Francisco earlier this year. If we look at that pop, and maybe you guys will feel guilty if you're drinking one, but that's 60% high fructose corn syrup, so there's that lack of diversity in our food sources. This is not the kind of cattle we like to raise on our place. So ultimately, she is obese and malnourished. We like to replace that with diversity in our livestock that looks like that, out on the land. When livestock are in a lot, you create a resource concern. When they're out on the land, they address them. And then ultimately, the health of the people. This is when we were in Hawaii a month ago. Multiple farmers markets every day. And for the most part, the people looked really healthy over there, and the food was delicious. If you notice that lady on the left, she's concerned about the next generation in her family. So Leupold sums it up very well here. Land then is not merely soil, it is a fountain of energy flowing through a circuit of soils, plants, and animals. So taking a look at the role of livestock in the 4 ecosystem processes as defined by holistic management, the energy flow. When we don't have the livestock out on the land, like these lands evolved with livestock. So when they're not out on the land, there's huge gaps in these cycles. If you think of energy flow, creating green plant material, and converting that into saleable beef or chicken, whatever, and then the water cycle as well. So say livestock drink from a tank, they go out, dung and urinate on the land, that water cycle is able to function again. And then also the mineral cycle, what's coming out the back end of those animals. Mineral rich dung and urine. And community dynamics, we're actually able to control weeds, as people like to call them, in our annual cropland situations by utilizing higher stock densities and inhibiting those weeds. So we bring the livestock on the land, they start to function once again. So they're a tool used to improve the resource and generate dollars for us. That's a picture of a mob grazing out on a biological primer a couple years ago. It was a very diverse biological primer, about 10 species. As you'll see, that's not as diverse as we're moving toward now, but this was a couple years ago. So that's what it looked like before grazing. This was a full season. And what we do is we put the livestock out there. That particular mob was 328 heifers grazing, and we moved them multiple times a day, 5 times a day. And the live weight was 685,000 pounds per acre. And a lot of people think that it's a lot of work moving livestock, but it doesn't have to be that way. We have the automatic gate openers. So I go out every morning. It takes me an hour to set up the fences. I have the rest of the day to do what I want, and I'm making a pretty good profit. So that's what it looks like after the litter on the soil surface, feeding soil biology. That's what we want. The livestock take the top third of the plant and leave the rest and trample it to feed that soil, which ultimately feeds us. So then after that, we continued regenerating by seeding right into that residue of fall-seeded biennial of triticale, vetch, and sweet clover. So the next spring, we bring those livestock back in. These are some heifers that we're developing for breeding. So they were grazing out there in mid-June, mid and late June, and there's a lot of biomass out there. And we purposely let the triticale get more mature, because if we didn't let it get that mature, it's a higher carbon plant right now. Our soils would be bare because they're so active. They would consume all that, and we would have bare soil, which is not good, obviously. So carbon is the key. That's what it looks like once they move in. People think that that's a lot of waste there, but it's not. Those are nutrients being cycled back into the soil. So here's economics from that graze. Net profit per acre, $185.85. Plus I always ask, what's the value of enhanced soil health? I'm not sure that we can put a value on that. It would be exponential though. Okay, so immediately after those heifers were out, we seeded another biological primer in there on the 12th of July. It contained diversity, obviously. Diversity promotes diversity. So that's what that looked like, a warm season. And this is biological primification at its finest, feeding the soil biology that sustains life. Like we talked about organic matter earlier, noticing an upward trend on our operation. Like I said before, we don't want to be losers. We like to win and gain. So yeah, we're at 5% now and hope to get to 12% by the end of my lifetime. That's my goal. And this would not be achieved without the integration of livestock on our cropland. So grass finishing on warm season mix then, we take these steers in and we don't graze at nearly as high a stock densities. We're focused on animal performance here. And if you notice, you can see fat around that guy's tail head. They're doing really well out there, gaining over 2.6 pounds a day. So that's our net profit per acre from our second graze on the same field. And what's the value of enhanced soil health? So total for the year, $332.99 an acre, which you will see later that almost rivals a corn crop. So yes, it can be profitable grazing livestock on cropland. And in return, we get that healthy soil. So here's a huge opportunity that is being missed out on. I just took this on a state level. 28.27 million acres in cropland right now. In January of last year, 1.69 million head of beef cattle in the state. So if we were to take a quarter of the cropland acres, set them aside for a biological primer, full season, we could run an additional 1.16 million head. So if we're in a food crisis and worrying about feeding 9 billion people, no problem. So at 1.5 average daily gain, that'd be about enough to feed another 7 million people. And just think about the careers that could be generated. You know, I went to college, fortunate or not, and a lot of the people that I graduated with didn't go back to the farm or ranch because they said, well, there's no opportunities. So they're going to town to work at agronomy centers, whatever. It doesn't have to be that way if we farm biologically, not at all. So this is a basic soil test that we took from that field then, the fall before we were going to plant corn into it. And it's saying there that we have 10 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So one that would lead us to believe that we got to buy nitrogen, right? But we just consider this a piss test for soil because all it's doing is testing your soil's drugs. We don't like to drug our soils. Once you do that, you kill the soil biology, which is willing to work for free. So we don't like to spend money and or piss away money. So then we plant into that biological primer residue the next spring with no synthetic fertilizer. And notice there's no weeds out there either. That's what the corn looked at tasseling, and it's holistically healthy. So this is leaf tissue analysis from Ward Labs. And as you can see, the plant is sufficient or high in every nutrient. So where did they come from? The soil biology. So we didn't use any synthetic fertilizers here and got an excellent corn crop off of there. 142 bushel corn. So the soil can be alive, your management just has to allow it to be. So we choose to farm biologically rather than chemically or input driven. This is Joe Clapperton's data showing the PLFAs. Jay touched on it a little bit. I'm not smart enough to comprehend this, but all I know is that it's diverse and that 6,000 number is a high number, and that's what we want to see. And then this is Rick Haney's data out of ARS in Temple, Texas, comparing two fields, one that had the mob grazing for 2 years compared to one right next to it that actually has been in no-till 10 years longer, but without livestock integration. So look at the different levels of nutrients there that those livestock are interacting and bringing forth. Okay, so here's our net profit per acre from that cornfield then, $785.66. So we can choose to farm biologically or chemically. current versus natural. Took this picture at our place. That's the neighbor out there farming chemically. We're doing it biologically by running livestock on the land. And as you can see, these are the county averages from last year. Let's return to labor and management under chemically driven systems. So what is that, half as much money? A lot of people are just focused about money, and we're focused on soil health. If you focus on soil health, the money will come. So moving on now, I'm going to pose this question: what's a garden? No one can answer that? Okay. I consider it nothing more than a diverse arrangement of annual weeds, and we get produce from that garden. So this is Dad's crazy idea of putting our garden in with a biological primer this summer. So ended up being a 70 species mix, seeded, was that mid-May, I believe. And these are the potatoes. A lot of you have probably seen this before, but you just place the potatoes on top of the soil surface, unroll a second cutting alfalfa bale. We also had onions in here as well. Those potatoes and onions grow right up through that. And that's what it looked like when we were harvesting. You just peel the hay back, harvest your potatoes. So that was one morning of picking our produce out in the biological primer garden. And that's what we got, very diverse. And that was just in hours of picking. And it's fun, it's like Easter egg hunting when I was a kid. You go out and there's a watermelon, there's a zucchini. It was really enjoyable. Plus, it arbored all this life. I know Jonathan Lundgren was out there this summer, and he was giddy because of all the insects in there, and it was pretty exciting. Everyone that toured our place, I would say that this was the highlight for them when they came through this summer. So then measuring the nutrient density of these foods, that's a refractometer up there in the upper right, and it's measuring Brix, and what Brix is measuring the minerals, vitamins, amino acids of these plants. So obviously we want a higher Brix level. And I measured Brix of our zucchini and squash, went to the store, bought a zucchini and squash, and ours was doubled. I'd like to contribute that to healthy soil. So if we look at the nutrients of a lot of the food that the people are eating these days, there's no nutrients in them. You go to Walmart and see how many healthy people are there? Not very many. So high Brix equates to high mineral absorption of the plant, higher dissolved solids and less water, enhanced aroma and longer shelf life, which is huge. And they also contain higher levels of trace minerals. So then after we were done harvesting what we wanted to out of the garden, we turned the steers out there. This was in early September, and they gained approximately 2.5 pounds a day. So they came right off a biological primer, went into this biological primer that was really diverse. And then once we moved the steers, we brought the poultry out there. These are my laying hens. That's the egg mobile there. So they go in there at night. There's an automatic door on the side, and they lay eggs for me out there. We have the netting around them this year. These were younger hens. I'd like to get some dogs in the future so that I don't have to screw around with that netting because it is a pain. And these are the broilers. We didn't run these on that biological primer field, but as you'll see, these are a lot more lucrative than the laying hens and actually about everything else. But we run broilers, move this pen on a daily basis, and sell meat birds as well. So the biological feast, take a look at what we've done this summer. Pounds of saleable beef produced per acre on that biological primer garden was 100.1 pounds. The average American eats about 50 pounds of beef per year. So the eggs produced, 3,570, enough to feed 14 people for 1 year. The average person eats about 240 eggs a year. And then pounds of vegetable. They say people should get 2.5 cups a day. So I went off of that number, enough to feed 10 people for 1 year. And this is on a per acre basis. So if we were to run those chickens on there, the average person eats about 70 pounds of chicken a year, enough to feed 25 people for a year. And then also just think about the food produced for the others, the soil biology, the insects, plants, animals, etc. So here's the gross then from the garden produce per acre. Oops, I'll move to the net right away. How's that corn crop looking? Not so good, right? Plus we add the beef on top of that. Net profit of $575.58. And then the free range eggs I sell for $3 a dozen. I have just over $1 into them. Net profit $8.85. And if we were running the broilers out there, look at how much money we can make per acre there. They're very lucrative. So when we compare these two, total net profit per acre, $4,538.70 compared to that $365 monoculture corn crop. So you tell me why we're getting farms that are in the tens of thousands of acres. It's ridiculous. We're pushing people off the land, which it shouldn't be that way. If you're interested in learning about the biological model, I'd tell you to look into Cuba's production model and what they've done throughout the past 20 years since the Soviets pulled out. So we're regenerating landscapes at the same time. That's the take-home message here. We want to regenerate and not degrade. So looking at the additional income possibilities, this year we got sheep, which we will be direct marketing next year. Pork, could you imagine how well pigs would do out in a biological primer? I think pretty well. Rabbits as well. Looking at a grass-fed rabbit, I saw some people getting $35. Multiple generations per year, that would be very lucrative as well. Floral arrangements, this was a lady that was out for the No-Till on the Plains tour this summer. She made that. What would that sell for? I don't know, 20 bucks maybe? And then also carbon sequestration. You know, it's a huge carbon sink by utilizing these biological primers and livestock. Okay, and then hunting as well. I got to tell the story. I shoot sporting clays this summer, and the sporting clays range is right south of my house, and this field was out there, and the guys would always give me a hard time that we have such a poor sunflower field. Well, by the end of the year, I educated them enough, and they were really excited when they got to come out hunting, because, yeah, limiting out on pheasants is not a problem out there. So they started to understand that, hey, this is pretty cool. And it creates a lot of trophies. This is my trophy buck gopher here, but I was able to shoot this year. So instead of a 4-point buck, it's a 4-pound buck. So then they're looking at the results of managing regeneratively. I got them up there. But that hunting, that's all part of quality of life. We're finding that as we move away from chemicals and into biology, focusing on biology, we have a much higher quality of life. We're storing more carbon. As you can see, our profits greatly increased, and we're not having to write so many checks. So comparing the two cycles, biological, we're resilient. Chemical, you create problems. We have balanced cycles compared to extreme cycles when we are input driven. We regenerate instead of degenerate. We have natural yields. The reason I have that up there is that everyone's focused on the yield, right? Okay, so are the yields detrimental if they're not natural then? If they're pumped full of synthetics, are those yields, what I'm trying to say, are those yields unnatural to nature and they'll eventually degrade the resource? I would believe that. So farming biologically is also cheap, and we're being a part of nature. We're not antagonizing it. All of these sides, we're always trying to kill everything. You saw that picture Jay had up there of the monoculture corn crop in Iowa. There's no life out there. Who wants to see that? Not customers that buy our product, I know that. So which education model is driving us? This is a picture I took at Cool Springs Ranch up in Saskatchewan last year. And that's their turkeys. They move the bus around. But anyways, I tend to learn more when I observe nature rather than being educated or taught in different universities or whatever. So I think that Masanobu here, he wrote The One Straw Revolution and Sowing Seeds in the Desert. I'd recommend you read those books. But he says modern research divides nature into tiny pieces and conducts tests that conform neither with natural law nor with practical experience. The results are arranged for the convenience of research, not according to the needs of the farmer. I think he hit the nail on the head there. If you look at our universities now, they are fairly well funded and infiltrated by multinationals. So what are you really learning? Well, you're learning how to write checks. That's about it. So I'm going to leave you with this. What will your legacy be? What do you want to leave that next generation? A degraded resource that's not able to sustain them, or one that is full of life that will not only sustain them but nurture them? So we can continue to degrade, or we can regenerate. And that's our contact information. Thank you.